Live. Coming to you. Misty. John, too early for that.
Remind me to show you the latest piece of
I know, right? Oh, I gotta.
It's like the glamour shots. Something else. It's like a glamour shot. It's the image of Jesus. It's hilarious. Come in, come in tomorrow and I'll show you. It's hilarious. I've been putting up little tchotchkes he sent me, but I just can't. It's too big and gaudy to put up.
My mother-in-law made that borscht. And she got black bread from the Russian market. So I have black bread and borscht. Yeah, it's like a pumpernickel, like a brown, yeah, bright red, yeah. Yeah.
So it's like unfair, I think. It's like
And what she does is she makes it vegetarian. I don't need and so I get to enjoy it.
That's exactly what I just said to her. That's exactly what you said. It's like super brown, but
Oh, yeah, that's Saturday.
You're welcome to come by and you say it. Yeah, absolutely.
Karen, I did edits on that. I just didn't do it. Sorry. Okay. No. Okay. I did look at it.
Right.
So anyways. Okay.
And you get white nights also in the summer. It's never gets dark. It gets dusky. Well, in the summer.
And I already went up and visited one spot. I have an ID.
Oh, I know why that is.
How can you?
Did you go on like a riverboat thing?
First time.
I'm going to talk.
But it was really different, right?
First time.
Yeah. I make it sent out.
Right. Right? Aaron, did my 130 pen fall out of my? Thank you. This pen I've had for him.
So Mike, there were 2 rounds. We got the first round. We didn't apply in the second round.
I've been given already that
Okay.
information.
Yeah. Who knows if we would have gotten it if we did, maybe.
Yeah, but we have somebody on the inside track. He's gonna feed information to make sure we don't submit it.
Okay.
If we get on board.
Okay.
I tried to tell him.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:30 p.m. I see that David Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access Channel is recording. Is there anyone else here recording this meeting? We will do roll call in alphabetical order. Bill Bontempi? Cheryl Caruana? Here. Sean Kennedy?
Here.
Lisa Murray?
Here.
Rich Rediker?
Here.
Mike Tirabassi? Here. Michelle Boudreaux. Aye, here. So you please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Mike, would you please lead us? If we could please pause for a moment of silence to honor Patricia Gordon, who passed away on September 2nd. Pat Gordon dedicated 37 years of her life to teaching and enriching the lives of countless students as an earth science teacher here at Minnetonka Regional High School and spent several years as a school committee member. She will be remembered for her incredible contributions to education, her dedication to her students, and her tireless efforts to make a positive impact on our community. Please join me in a moment of reflection. Thank you. So we will begin with the Assistant Superintendent for Finance Operations and Human Resources, and Osborne.
I'm up very quick. Okay, excellent. Oh, there we go, that's better. I'm up quick. So you have, first item, budget reports. I'm going to start with fiscal 23. This is the last fiscal 23 report you will see. This is the closing report for the general fund budget. You will see at the bottom, we finished with a $360,000 surplus. As a reminder, we took $850,000 out of E&D, so this will go back to somewhat replenish that. But, you know, it doesn't fully replenish the amount we took out of E&D to fund the year. So moving on to fiscal 24, a committee member came to me and suggested that maybe I could provide something in writing to help follow along with the budget report going forward, and I will endeavor to do so. You have a memo included within your packet that summarizes some of the major items that we're seeing in the budget report. The first items you will see is lines 2305 and 2310. Those budgets are showing surpluses right now. There are two factors to that are significant. We do have some rolling vacancies. We also have some staff who are taking leaves for various reasons. Very similar to last year, we will end up seeing the savings in some of those leaves end up being recognized in long-term substitute costs. So it's a give and take in some areas there. Line 2710, we are maintaining some adjustment counselor positions that were previously directly paid out of our ESSER grants. We do have ESSER grant funding to cover those, and we will, depending on where we end the year at, we will close those out on the ESSER grant as we go through. Electricity, you know, I'm calling it a bit of a wild card. Rates have been all over the place. We're in the process of securing rates for the coming year. That number is mostly based on a very large encumbrance. I'm looking into how much we've encumbered. There's also an encumbrance. We pay into when you see the solar credits that we get, we pay into the solar producing facility on a regular basis, so there's some give and take there as well. I'm going to look at that. I'm hopeful that we will not be that deep into the red in electric at the end of this year. And then finally, line 9300, that is some of our out-of-district costs. That's really represented by the 14% OSD increase that came about as we were working on the budget. There are some other lines in special education that will help offset that we hope are going to come out to the positive, so that may balance out a little bit. There is also still legislation passing through the Senate and the House aimed at doing something to offset that cost. We have no idea what that's going to end up looking like in an end result or if it's ever going to be passed, but we're hopeful of that. Any other questions? Any questions?
No, just thank you. I was able to follow.
Okay, you're very welcome. It's not that terribly difficult. It's just not something I thought of. I appreciate you bringing it up. So the next item on my agenda is the town meeting warrants. So the town of Wilbraham has come to us and suggested that they would like to break our 2 warrant items into 4 warrant items. You will see a draft of the warrant articles in your packet. Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, Article 4. To do so, that would require a vote of the school committee to break those up. You know, keep in mind if Wilbraham breaks these up and Hamden doesn't, and they take different votes on any or all of these, everything can fall off the table. That's kind of the challenge with breaking it up.
Why do they want to break it up? Why do they want to break it up?
I don't think we had a clear reason.
In the past, they had asked it to be broken up so they could really get granular with the warrants, with what we were asking for finance. I would say, I would recommend that we do it this time. Let's do it this time and then let's see how it rolls out. If this is how they want it, let's give it to them how they want it and go from there.
But the ramification is we may screw up the vote for Hamden.
But also the ramifications could be that if we had 2 warrants, that there's one that they want to approve, one that they don't want to approve on the same warrant, so they won't approve them both. So.
Do we have the opportunity to get them broken up for Hamden as well, so that they match?
I guess if they broke them all up into 4 separate items, if Wilbraham votes Article 1 but not Article 2, and Hamden votes Article 2 but not Article 1, they're both dead. So, you know, this is why most regional districts group things up into chunks. I don't, you know, so there's risks either way. I don't know what to say.
We've heard this from them before, so let's do what they ask. In the spirit of openness between the town and the school committee, we'll give them the warrants as they ask, and if for some reason something like that happens, then the next time they ask for that, we can always point back to this. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys hearing feedback on this? You know? Oh, okay. Right? You're hearing it, right?
I can try turning down the volume a little more.
So we need a motion to separate the articles.
I make a motion to separate the warrant articles into 4 different warrants. Just one quick question while I'm doing this. What's article number 5?
I think that's for them.
Yeah, that's not ours. I apologize. I copied the whole thing.
Oh,
What they
Probably should have
recommend,
just been the 4.
whatever free cash there is that's certified that they don't recommend to go to schools, or the town doesn't vote to go to the schools, will go into the free cash account. And that is the account that they use for capital expenses for the next fiscal year coming up. So the oncoming budget season.
okay.
So it's kind of, you know, it's the same pool of money.
Gotcha. All right, I make a motion to divide the warrants up into 4 different articles and send it to the towns.
Second.
Any questions or discussion?
What is John and Adam think we should do? Aaron? What is your opinion on this?
I mean, I think there's risks no matter how you cut it. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm presenting what the risks are of this approach. If you did them all as one, right, you could stand to lose everything, right, because it's a single vote. So sometimes making the chunks big can have more risk. sometimes making them small can have some risk. So I don't know, I don't have enough history with the town doing this. This is our first go at this. I think Sean seems to have a tit for tat mentality here in terms of but to see what they do with it. So, we'll put it forward as they're asking for it. I'm sorry, it's a game theory method. And see what they do with it. And then in the future, you can gauge your decision-making based on how that response is taken.
Sounds reasonable.
That's a fair approach.
Okay. Any other discussions or questions?
I was just going to weigh in on that because I think it was directed to me too. I think, this is somewhat speculative, but I think it is to a certain extent academic because unlike the budget as a whole, these individual things can live as chunks, and so I think it's likely that there would be a motion on the floor to separate them anyways. So, this is a way to sort of get ahead of that.
Anyone all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0.
I have one more item to share very quickly. I'm going to pass this around. It didn't make the packets. I apologize.
But before we move on to another item, I did have some question about the terminology in the warrants here.
Mm-hmm.
Is any editing possible?
Is what?
Is any editing of what's written in these warrants at this point possible?
That would need to be through the town. What would need to be edited, I suppose?
Well, the one that describes for cameras,
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be wise to put security cameras instead of just cameras, so it's clear what we're dealing with. And the one,
Okay.
that's actually the only other, I just realized you put IEP needs there. The other one was the one that's for the HVAC, somewhere to have the wording there,
Mm-hmm.
state mandated.
Okay.
Just to kind of make it clear that, there's,
Okay. We can email Nick on that and see if we can just make sure security's in there. That's fair. Did everybody get the handout I provided? So this is the one bid we received for the railing project. As you will recall, every estimate we've received, and we've had multiple estimators and people look at this, we were looking at around $125,000 maximum. You will see that this came in at $488,000. This is unfortunately the world we're living in right now for bids. My understanding is, this was a legitimate bid for this project. We are going to look at what some options are for re-engineering. So within the bid process, there is an ability to, within the next 30 days, to try to re-engineer the project into something that we can afford. Unfortunately, looking at, even just doing the front section, this bid coming in at $271,000 is more than twice what we expected for the whole project. I don't know, what they can engineer that down to. It's a challenge. And we're seeing this, over and over with things that we bid out. Contractors are often way too busy, and they'll bid something out and say, well, if I get it, I'll put in the overtime necessary to make it happen. Or they're just incredibly high. I mean, again, we're not making these estimates ourselves. We have engineers and people like that we paid to come up with these, and we're just shocked.
Just to be clear, this is the plexiglass, right?
Yes, on the railings, yep.
$500,000?
Yep.
I think I'm in the wrong business.
For the entire job.
The $500,000 would be for the entire job. To do just really the front section, because we weren't sure where things were going, we offered them the opportunity to bid on the front section and then alternates as the side, and then do everything we could afford to do. So the front section is the $271,000. Again, more than twice what we had kind of prepared for.
Is the side, the 120,000?
Is what?
Is the side?
Yes, those are the
about
side bids, yes, those are the
120,000?
alternates. So you call them alternates in the
Yeah.
business, they're the side areas.
Is the purpose for safety? Is that why?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So I have a question. So I know that the plans that were used to build Minichog, they were
Mhm.
used for another high school, right? Is there anything in place to protect the railing area in the other high school? Or, you know,
No.
did they
I
encounter any
thought Steve
similar
had talked to
issues?
them, yeah. Steve can speak to that, he did speak to them.
The railing in the model school of Ashland High School is actually 6 inches lower than this railing. The architects in designing added a 6-inch step up to make the railing higher. But Ashland does not have any protection beyond that issue, beyond their height of the railing.
So we're gonna see what we can do, go back to the drawing board a little bit, we'll try to re-engineer this if it's possible. If not, we may have to go back to the drawing board with our engineer and see if there's another option. Just, yeah.
Does it make any sense to get the fire department involved so they can say whether it's safety for occupancy?
I mean, I think it's a good case to be made for getting the money. I don't think it changes the bid cost. So, you know, if we do, you know, if this continues into our capital plan for coming years, I think this would stay on our capital plan. And we would, you know, certainly look to have the support of, say, the fire department or the police department, as it were, on some of these matters. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
We will move on to new business. We'll begin with the NEASC accreditation. Steve Hale.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello?
So we are here tonight to present our information from our NEASC evaluation journey. It is a much different journey than in the past. In the past, every 10 years, you would have a very long visit by a very large team for about a week's time, and then you would get your report. They've somewhat streamlined the process now, and Georgina will talk about that. But we had our first collaborative visit in October of 22. We got our draft report in May of 23, and in late August, we got our letter that the board had voted on our accreditation status. That doesn't mean that we're done. We have some work to do, and we'll go over that with you tonight. But Georgina? Sure.
Next slide. So this is the process, so you have a kind of an understanding of it. The school started with a self-study, and we ended up with a written report, and the self-study took an entire year. First, we started with the staff itself, just asking questions to see where they stood, and we did some follow-up surveys with them with the actual NEASC supplied survey. So we didn't develop the survey. NEASC also offers you a survey for the families and also for students. So it's kind of nice because it's already been vetted for any kind of bias. So it's a nice way of surveying. So we used those surveys to try to get us grounded. And then we also did, because it was really nice to hear from students a lot more than student voice, so we ran 9 focus groups. We ran them during the day and after school. We had free snacks for them, so they were all excited about that. And the students actually offered us a lot of great information to give us a foundation of some of the things we wrote about when it came to our review. The review itself takes on kind of like the outline of the NEASC 6 standards, so there's many principles within the standards. And we had 34 teachers broken up into 2 into teams of 2, and they took on 2 or 3 principals each, and they reviewed, found all the data, and then did the write-up for it. And then after that, we had a group of people edited, and then it was whittled down to 2 people editing, and then the report was ready for publication. When we published that to NEAS, the conference committee came out and read that review ahead of time, and then they went through the building and the staff, and they had interviews with different people. But the best thing is they love it when you have students doing the tours, the student interviews. Then we did staff interviews. I think the administration was interviewed, maintenance was interviewed, support staff was interviewed. So they had a lot of stakeholders that were interviewed in that process. They gather all that evidence, and they sit in a room and basically write their report, and they look at what you've written and what they've observed and kind of compare. They have questions, which is called a member check, to go back and check their data, and then they come up with a final report, and they report to you at their end of their visit right then in those 2 days. So it was really nice to have that discussion with them. And then as Steve said, we had the final report that was issued, and then the letter was issued, and then they're coming back in September. So we are now going to get to the next step of really looking at what we have to work on for our visit in September.
I thought it was important to kind of examine the costs of this. Because sometimes there's a lot of benefit to having some peer review to find out where external people in education feel like you're doing a great job, and where maybe there's some areas and opportunities for growth. But there is a significant cost. So in the 21-22 school year, you have your annual dues, plus you have the PD allocation. That allocation is to assist with creating your team and having them work beyond the school day on these different items. And 22-23 last year, you had your dues, which is an annual cost, and then your PD hours and the visit for 4 people for 2 days. This year we have our dues. We're continuing our PD allocation because we have to write that spring report in response to our growth areas by this coming spring. And then next year we're estimating a $20,000 cost. Because not only for the visit of 8 people, 3 days, and the NEAS dues. So you're talking about this work, which was a 4-year endeavor. You're looking at $65,000. So it's a significant commitment. But I thought that was important to share.
Okay, so then just to give you a sense of what we had to review when it came to the actual self-study, this is the breakdown. I won't read them all to you. I'll give you just a moment to review them, how you break it down. Okay, so those are the pieces in which we broke down the self-study and which you're reviewed on too. So if you go to the next slide, where it says accommodations, these are the things that they picked up on that they really thought we did well at Minichog. The first one is an exact quote that we had safe, positive, respectful, and supportive school, a safe, positive, respectful, and supportive school environment. And next is the learning supported by. And so it's kind of broken down all these things that they said Minichog does very well. And so we have universal designs, not necessarily universal design for learning, all right, but it's a little wider than that. And so they noticed that we were breaking down barriers and creating access points for students, but they especially noted where we did it for AP and honors, that we included also cultural responsiveness in it, but we opened up the access for students. And then they also have commitment to differentiate instruction and to offer different assessment options, not just one for students. And then to look at our commitment to technology and how teachers were using it at such a different level, and offering it in many ways for students to express what they're teaching and what they're learning is. Also, just a little plug for the library there. They did put it in their letter that we had great library resources, and it was managed by a licensed professional. And then for the curriculum, curriculum focus. They noticed that we started with instructional alignments and learning outcomes, and that was positive. And also our assistance program. We had just started the assistant team, student success team, and they really thought that was innovative and working out well. And then that last one is the integrated learning strategies to encourage inquiry, problem-based learning, and higher order thinking. I thought we did that well.
Clean and well-maintained facility. I mean, I can't say enough about our custodial staff. Everyone that walks in this building, the comment is most frequently, when was this built? And they're shocked to know that we've been in here 11, 12 years because it still looks brand new. And then the community partnerships for student exploration. That has to speak to our internship program where we have close to 100 students going out and getting work-based learning, but also it speaks to our expansion in our CTEC enrollment, which is up to about 56 students this year. So those are positive things. So some of the priority work that we need to do.
Yeah. So 1.2a is pretty significant, so that's why it's in yellow, just to give you an idea. And it's not that we did not have it, we didn't have it finalized. So we had already started our work anticipating that the vision of the graduate is an important piece of the NEASC review. And that's, there's two parts to it where you want to align it to the curriculum, culture, policy, and practice. And also you want to align it with our child values and our behavior expectations and professional development. So we were in the process of developing the vision of the graduate, and now we're at the point where we wanted to align it. And we'll get back into that a little bit more to give you some more detail. But that was the one piece that they said we needed to have as a priority.
Next would be creating Tier 2 intervention strategies for all students. So Tier 2 refers to the targeted interventions for students who are identified as needing those additional supports. So we are expanding on our Tier 2 interventions this year, both academically and within the social-emotional realm. We're incorporating some intervention blocks for math and ELA, and then we are hoping and planning to implement some Tier 2 groups based on our data from our universal screener that will be happening next month.
Providing additional learning opportunities speaks to our ability to stay current with materials. A lot of funding is now shifted away from textbooks and more to subscriptions for staff to be able to use. But they would still, in certain areas like updating textbooks, and examine some expanding learning opportunities for students, which again speaks to that CTEC career vocational piece and how we can further develop that relationship with CTEC and opportunities for kids. Designing a framework for long-term professional development. That's a goal of every principal, every curriculum director across the state. What ends up happening is you sit down with your calendar, you begin to plan your professional development for the year, and then you get this list of, oh yeah, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. So all the have-tos end up as an overlay of this long-term growth that you'd like to see. And that's just something I think every school district in Massachusetts struggles with. To continue, and our goals being improving the rigor, continuing the equity work, and incorporating the vision of the graduate in that professional development work.
Next is to continue to develop staff engagement with our core values and the future vision of the graduate into the instructional spaces, and how are those core values and vision of the graduate present in universal expectations. So I think the expectations for staff right now is to evaluate how the core values and the vision of the graduate can be incorporated into their teaching practices. Our goal is to then have all teachers have the language of the vision of the graduate embedded in their course syllabus, and then eventually tie that to the learning objective for the lesson. We think having this common language will help and continue to foster the unified school culture and climate for both students and staff.
And I think just,
Question.
yeah.
Is NEASC look at how library function below, you know, on the way up from elementary to middle to high school? Is that?
I mean, it comes up in terms of the discussion of the skills students come prepared with, but really the NEASC visit is more about your school versus any kind of vertical alignment pre-K to 12. And just going back to the vision of the graduate work, like, we could have had that vision of the graduate work done in about 3 days. I go to the graphics department, I say to my kids, design a graphic that represents what we have as a vision for our graduate. And they would pull in all the arrows and the person with the hat, and, you know, all that stuff. We didn't want to do that, and I know that there are schools out there that do it just for the purposes of getting it done. We wanted to take the vision of the graduate, talk to our staff members about what they're seeing, translate that, Georgina will speak to this, translate that into competencies. What are the competencies our kids need before they walk across the stage at Symphony? And then those competencies become instructional strategies in the classroom. So that's really interwoven in what we do, not just a graphic on our letterhead. The last thing they wanted us to prioritize, I think it's timely, find some solutions for indoor temperature conditions. So we continue to work on that.
I think it's also, yeah, I think it's also, if you don't mind me adding a little bit more.
Sure.
It's important to note that the committee noted all of those except the air conditioning, that temperature one. Everything else was something that we had made suggestions on, so we were really on target in our assessment. So the vision of the graduate, just to give you a sense of how we've worked on this, it's been over a year that we've worked on it. We kind of started with that model, not last summer, but really kind of like the summer before we came up with the model. And really it's kind of examining what are competencies, what do we want our mid-charge students to actually graduate with. And we had to look at that level of growth. How do you grow a competency? And it really starts with looking at what you're doing in the classroom, what tasks are you having students doing, what assessments are you having them do, and how that builds into skills. Skills then grow, and once you have skills, those are the things that grow into competencies, so that they become almost reflexive, and then they can go across different environments, they can go across different years, you might say, because if someone starts here for freshman year through 12th grade, you're building those skills into competencies, and how do they change as you recontextualize them, depending on what subject matter you're looking at, or even outside of school. So we really came down to looking at what competencies we want our students to have, and we actually started working with our staff and saying, what do you think by department? And then we had this natural CHOG piece that was already built by the climate team, the CHAUG, and we needed to say, we said, okay, it's a great marketing tool at this point, it's working well. How can we expand on that? How can we build that through behavior, also through academics, and then move with that? So that's kind of like what we worked with. We surveyed the staff, I think 3 times at this point. We're probably going to do it again. And we drafted initial competencies, and they're in that was the draft form originally, and they've improved since then. And then we started to identify alignments, even with the strategic plan. So we don't want you to think that we didn't look at the HWRSD strategic plan to see where things could fit in. Because if we're going to do this work, let's do it more efficiently, and let's put our efforts into together. And so that's kind of where we started and ended up last year. And then Molly will talk about climate.
Yeah, so as Georgina said, we really used our CHOG core values as the backbone and the main piece of our discussion that led to the vision of the graduate and the competencies. So through the work of the climate team, over the last couple of years, we have really spent time with defining what these core values are, and then providing examples like for behavior expectations in the classroom. So what you see on the screen are posters that were created last year that are placed in all of our classrooms, and then some larger ones are placed throughout the building, so that students and staff are constantly reminded of what these core values are. And so because of that, because it's also mentioned on daily announcements and things like that, we thought it was really important to have the vision of the graduate align with those core values and the behavior expectations that students already hear and see daily.
And our advisory today was all about our core values and what they mean, what does that behavior look like in a classroom, and how might it be demonstrated by students. It was really well done by the audit team. And finally, so what are our next steps? Our staff has been tasked with the challenge to review all of our competencies that our team developed over the summer and be prepared to vote on them in the September faculty meeting. Then the work shifts from October to June to develop those aligned lessons and share them across content areas to incorporate that vision of the graduate competencies into core syllabi language for second semester, and to update all of our curriculum maps to include that. And while doing so, having conversations with students at all levels to discuss how these competencies develop our future graduates and how they help in their future post-secondary learning environments. And then finally, September of 24, we identify those intersections, fill gaps, and then continue to incorporate the vision of the graduate into lessons on a wider scale. So that's our plan.
And that's just the C example, just so you get to see it. We have the other ones, but just kind of have an idea of what we're looking at.
Any questions?
It's a lot of work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
We will continue with old business, the booster club update. John?
Sure. And I will just ask Principal Hale to stick around to correct anything I say or add to anything that may be developing over this. This is just really brief. My understanding is that there, since the last school committee meeting, was some outreach, and there's now a plan for the continuation of the booster club. My understanding is that Pete Dufresne has been appointed as the interim president with the sole task of convening an organizational meeting whose purpose will be to seat new board members and officers. Also, I can say that the fundraising for the fall has begun with fundraisers for football and field hockey. I think those are the only fundraisers that we'll be doing this fall. And then also I have some thoughts about, addressing some of the sort of larger questions that the school committee had. I put them in an email to legal counsel for the school committee, and when I get some responses for that, we'll share them with the whole committee.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, we will continue. Public comment? Is there anyone here that would like to make public comment? Okay, we will continue. We'll move on to the subcommittee updates. We'll begin with the curriculum subcommittee.
Okay, we met today, and I will give a full report about what happened at the meeting today at our next meeting.
Thank you. Next is the planning committee. We have a meeting on Tuesday, September 12th at 5:30 in the district conference room. Yes. We will be having our meeting Tuesday, September 12th at 5:30 in the IRC. Okay. So we'll move on to finance and operations. Sean?
Yeah, we had our first meeting, got everything ready to go, talked about the warrants a little bit, and as you can see, that has even changed since then. But we'll be meeting again shortly with representatives from Wilbraham and Hamden, and move on from there.
We'll move on to the LPVEC Collaborative Representative, Lisa.
We had our first meeting with Alvin as the new executive director. We went over what staff did for professional development. We went over the budget, but one of the more interesting things that I think parents would like to know about is we had previously talked about tracking the busing, and the rollout of that didn't go as planned. So when they went to start that new program, the new program made bus routes that didn't make sense. So kids' pickups would be like in the middle of the highway, and like it didn't make sense. So they have to go back and program it manually instead of just an easier rollover process. And hopefully that app will work halfway through the year, and they decided to pilot it in Long Meadow right now so that they could get the kinks out of it before they roll it out to all the rest of the districts. And that's it.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the LPVEC Corporation representative, Sharon.
Nothing's changed. The person I talked to at the corporation said that there would be probably three meetings for the year. And so what I would suggest is instead of having this on each meeting, I'll wait until I get a call from her, and then I'll let the chair know that we can put it on the agenda.
Thank you. Negotiation subcommittee. There are no negotiations going on currently, so we can continue from there. And policy subcommittee. Has there been a meeting yet? Okay.
Not had a meeting.
Okay. And then technology subcommittee. No meeting on that either.
In terms of policy, we need to have a meeting too, because the chair has left, so we have to determine who the chair is.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. We will move on to consent agenda.
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay. Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to the superintendent's update. John.
Thank you. I always make it a point to experience student arrival on the first day of school. Once the year gets rolling, student drop-off is all about maximizing efficiency. But on the first day, people take their time, especially in the lower grades. At parent drop-off, people begin arriving a long time before the schoolhouse doors swing open. They take photos. Sometimes they include the family dog. Parents chit-chat with school personnel and other parents. Or they call out from their cars to renew relationships with teachers they haven't seen in some time. And the students come off the bus, seem happier than they do on any other day of the year. And it didn't hurt that the weather was absolutely gorgeous. It was nothing like what we're experiencing now. At Stony Hill, someone remarked that it seemed that everyone had had a good night's sleep. A colleague remarked that everyone felt prepared for the upcoming year. It wasn't the only time I heard similar remarks that week. Last year, the challenges of implementing new core programs created a kind of emotional background noise that was sort of very present on the opening of school. But this year, the unspoken message seemed to be, we got this. The current heat wave has been the biggest challenge we've had so far because our buildings don't have central air conditioning. I think this is the third time it's coming up tonight in the meeting. However, every building has at least some air-conditioned spaces. And I've been in every building since the start of the heat wave and can tell you there's some very hot rooms and there's some oases of coolness in each of the buildings. Sewell Row probably has the fewest cool spots, so we brought in extra fans to help the school. But everyone is doing their best to try to keep each other as comfortable as possible and rotating through the cooling zones in their buildings. We're also increasing the hydration of students with water and freeze pops. We've changed the lunch menu into cold sandwiches so that cooking equipment doesn't add more heat to the buildings. And we moved some of our practices off the turf or scheduled them for later in the evening. In short, we're doing everything we can to ride this out as comfortably as possible. I've had a few inquiries about an early dismissal tomorrow, and have consulted with several superintendents about this. While it will be hot and not ideal for learning, I know I have principals to cycle kids through cooling zones and nurses to monitor them when they're in school. If I send them home early, I don't know if they'll have any supervision or if they'll decide to go out and play in the sun. Certainly, any parent who thinks it's too hot can excuse their child from school tomorrow, and I respect that, but I'm not going to force that decision on everyone by shortening the day. We have one more hot day to go, and we should be in for some wetter and cooler weather, so I'm asking everyone to hang in there for one more day, and would ask us all to think about how we can use the capital planning process to make our buildings a little more resilient to these types of weather events. To this point, much of the air conditioning we've added to our schools has been to accommodate individual health needs, and so that's resulted in kind of a patchwork, with some schools having much more cooling options than others. Traditionally, it's been schools where we've had a lot of special education programs and a lot of medically needy students. Other schools haven't had so many programs like that in the past, and so they don't have as many cooling spots. But I think as we look forward and can predict that this may be happening not only once in a while, but every September, maybe the first 2 weeks every September, we need to think about how we can make our schools more appropriate for that kind of weather. So I'm happy that there's air conditioning on the capital requests that are going forward and been voted, I think, for the third time by the school committee at this point. But that, again, is to address individual health needs. I think we need to start thinking about how can we be more strategic, especially in some of the schools where we don't have as much cooling capacity as we do at other schools. Transportation services got off to a smoother start this year. We did have a bus overheat on the first day of school, even though that was the day with the cool weather. And we're still tweaking times on Route 20. However, the difference from last year is night and day. Last year, we had 9 unfilled driver positions on the first day of school, and we're notifying riders of multiple routes that their pickup times would be delayed on a daily basis. Remember, at one time I brought in the histogram. I think one week we had over 50 calls of delayed bus routes. That hasn't been the case this year. Since January 27th, since January of last year, 27 transportation applicants have entered training for the collaborative. 9 have been licensed, and 2 of them are currently working in the Hamden Wilbraham Public Schools. An additional 10 applicants are still in training. One of the applicants is in training for a 7D van in Wilbraham, and 4 of the other applicants are in training for CDLs in Wilbraham too. So I think that will address the current unfilled positions and leave us some extra capacity for backup drivers, which was a real problem last year. We had already had routes combined, and there was no one on the bench when anyone got sick or had a medical emergency or had to take care of something that was happening in their family. So whenever that happened, it was chaos across our transportation. So I think that with the number of drivers that are currently being licensed, the number of drivers that are in various stages of training, and the way it started, we're in for a better year with transportation. We also were able to rehire 3 of our drivers who had previously resigned or retired, so that is helping as well. Lisa talked about transverses, so I'll skip that part, and I'll talk about the electric buses. So electric buses, which we've talked about, have not arrived yet. I asked them actually whether there would be any routing changes because of the new buses and their range limitations. At this point, I've been advised that it will not be necessary to change any routes when they bring the electric buses on. We've ordered the buses with the most current battery capacity. The mileage of these buses under ideal conditions is 120 miles. However, that drops when you start using components such as heaters, defrosters, radios, and it also depends on the temperature. The buses have their peak range when you're in about a 60-degree range. If it's warmer, the range decreases. If it's colder, the range decreases. So we're expecting that, the buses that we get, although they have a capacity of 120 miles, will probably have an actual capacity of more around 65 to 80 miles. And so that's what we're planning on in the routes that they'll be assigned to. We'll be starting with 4 buses this year. We'll also be updating the Wilbraham garage with infrastructure to charge the buses on site. And based on the limitations of the current technology, we'll be planning to continue to implement a mixed fleet of diesel and electric vehicles, probably shifting over to a greater number of electric vehicles in that fleet as the capacity expands and as the technology improves. So moving on to attendance. I'm sorry.
Can I just
Sure.
jump in? I've been getting a lot of calls about the busing, and I was wondering if, because that was a great report, I was wondering if that report could go on the website.
Sure, absolutely. And we will be shifting to our new website as of tomorrow as well. I'm sorry that we don't have the attendance in its usual format. The person who does that's out of the office. I'll supplement the usual report in the next packet. I can tell you we opened school with 2,857 students, which is 8 fewer than we had last September. But there's quite a bit of variance within the schools, and so really a school-by-school analysis is more appropriate. Mile Tree has 365 students, which is up 15 students from last year, and its highest enrollment since 2010. That's one of the schools that we identified as having space issues even before this latest increase. I will say that the kindergarten classes are also quite large because of that. We're now running 22 or 23 students per kindergarten. Wilbraham Middle School is up 13 students from last year. That's its highest enrollment since 2019. That's another school we've identified as having space issues. Green Meadows is down 35 students, and its lowest enrollment since it included a middle school. Stony is down 14 students. Sewell's up 14 students, and the high school has 1 fewer student than it did last September, so essentially even. Additionally, our C-Tech enrollment, as you heard earlier tonight, is now 56 students. To give you some detail on that, we have 15 students in 9th grade, 16 students in 10th grade, and both of those cohorts are new because that was a change in our policy. The 9th graders weren't able to go in last year, so this year's 10th graders and this year's 9th graders are all new students at C-Tech. There are 14 in 11th grade and 11 in 12th grade, so we've more than doubled enrollment in C-Tech. Finally, I'd like to update the community on our ongoing efforts to improve school safety. You may recall that we were awarded a STOP Act grant during the last school year. We now have a plan to use that funding to upgrade our threat assessment process by training multidisciplinary teams in the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, or CSTAG. They were originally known as the Virginia Student Threat Assessment Guidelines, and they're an evidence-based model for schools to use conducting threat assessments in K-12 schools. And so just to explain that, there are lots of times when a school may receive information either from a student, either in their verbalizations or report, something that's noticed online, or something that comes in through the community that may indicate some kind of threat against the school. And when that happens, schools have to assess the severity of the threat and determine the appropriate response based on their assessment of severity. And so that's what threat assessment is all about. We do have a threat assessment process in our current practice, but this CSTAG is really considered the gold standard of threat assessment. And so that's what we'll be training our teams on. Also, I think difference is CSTAG really identifies a multidisciplinary approach to doing threat assessments. In the past, it's really been heavily on school psychologists and principals to conduct threat assessments. So we're hoping to bring more lenses, more trained lenses to that threat assessment process to get a more efficient process. And it's a violence prevention system that emphasizes early attention to problems such as bullying, teasing, and other forms of conflict, attempting to interrupt them before they escalate into more violent behavior. And that aligns with the findings of our equity audit, which also call on us to adopt a more effective approach to teasing, bullying, and harassment. Because research shows that schools are safer when students feel they're treated with fairness and respect, and less safe when students feel alienated or isolated. So that is what we'll be doing with that grant, and that's my report.
I have a question. If I can go back to the enrollment report, when you have Green Meadows at negative 35 students, is that a decline in the enrollment from Hamden, or is that due to students going to the middle school in Wilbraham?
Well, I would say it's both. I mean, Green Meadows is almost entirely Hamden residents, and the decline is almost entirely because of student choice into the middle school in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
How has enrollment from Hamden so far, from beginning of this year, from beginning of last year? What has changed there? Are we still at a, what is it, 81-19 ratio, or has that changed more?
In the other grades?
I'm talking overall Hamden, Wilbraham.
Oh, I haven't done the math on it, but I would say that it is probably shifted a little bit more towards Wilbraham.
Thank you. Can you just make sure we get us those? If you could just, email it or something like that, that'd be great.
Any other questions or comments?
Also, for Green Meadows, we have 3 students in 6th grade and 4 students in 8th grade. Is that how it is presently now at that school?
That's correct.
And what, can you talk about that?
Sure. In the settlement agreement to the litigation that took place several years ago, one of the stipulations was that there would be a middle school in Hamden for any students who wish to have that. Currently, there are 3 students in 6th grade and 4 students in 8th grade who wish to have education in Hamden. And that has presented some challenges, but we're trying our best. It's presented staffing challenges. Most of the staff at the middle school have left for other positions, either within the district or in other districts, because looking at those student numbers, they wonder how long they can remain employed there. We are trying to fill in the gaps as best we can with online instruction, because we really aren't able to find instructors who want to go into that situation in an environment where it's hard to find teachers anyways. And I would opine, just as an educator, it's hard to provide the appropriate middle school social experience when numbers are so small. But that is a family right and a family choice, and we respect it.
How many of the 611 kids in Wilbraham Middle School are from Hamden? What's the breakdown there?
I don't have that number in front of me, but I can do some research and get back to you on that.
So basically, most of the kids from Hamden choose to go to Wilbraham, except for...
That's correct. That's correct.
You can extrapolate the numbers over, and get a rough idea.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we will move on to the future agenda items. Is there anything else that people would like on the agenda for our next meeting?
Yeah, could we, so I know we have our calendar for this year, right? But we don't have our calendar for next year. And I was wondering if, just because I've talked to some different parents and they would like to kind of be able to plan things out. So do you think that maybe we can put some time into working on a calendar for next year and the year after? So we're always 2 ahead, you know? And then next year we can do, you know, just so we always stay 2 years ahead. I think that would be smart planning for the lives of our teachers, students outside of school. Would that be okay?
Anyone else? Okay, our next meeting is on Tuesday, September 19th at 6:30 here in the IRC. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Please sign the minutes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, as you roll call vote. Cheryl? Aye. Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Myself, aye. We are adjourned. It is 7:31. Thank you.